Ethan Parker had never been the kind of person who gave up easily. Life had tested him more times than he could count, and every challenge seemed bigger than the last. At 28 years old, he lived in a small apartment on the edge of town, working long hours at a repair shop that barely paid enough to cover his bills. His dreams were much larger than his circumstances, but dreams alone did not put food on the table. Every month was a struggle. Every paycheck disappeared almost as soon as it arrived. Yet deep inside, Ethan still believed that one opportunity could change everything. For years, Ethan had developed a habit of visiting estate sales, flea markets, and abandoned storage auctions on weekends. He enjoyed searching through forgotten items that most people ignored. Sometimes he found small treasures and sold them for a profit. Most of the time, however, he returned home empty-handed. His friends often joked that he spent too much time chasing worthless junk. Ethan laughed along with them, but he secretly believed that hidden value existed in unexpected places. He had read countless stories about ordinary people discovering rare artifacts in garages and warehouses. Those stories inspired him to keep looking. One rainy Saturday morning, Ethan noticed an advertisement for a liquidation sale at an old industrial warehouse scheduled to close permanently. The building had once belonged to a manufacturing company that had gone bankrupt years earlier. Curious, he drove across town to see what remained inside. The warehouse looked forgotten by time. Rust covered the metal walls, broken windows lined the upper floors. Ubrine weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. Most people walking through the sale seemed uninterested. They glanced at the dusty equipment and quickly moved on. Ethan, however, felt strangely drawn to the place. Inside the warehouse stood piles of old machinery, wooden crates, filing cabinets, and countless boxes covered in dust. It looked like decades of forgotten history had been left untouched. As he wandered through the aisles, Ethan noticed several sealed crates stacked in a dark corner. Their labels had faded beyond recognition, but something about them caught his attention. Nearby sat several unusual metal components and antique-looking instruments unlike anything he had seen before. The entire collection appeared neglected and unwanted. While others ignored it, Ethan carefully examined every piece, wondering why it had been stored separately from everything else. At the center of the sale stood Richard Coleman, the wealthy CEO responsible for overseeing the liquidation. Richard had built a reputation for sharp business instincts and little patience for dreamers. He watched buyers with a confident smile, convinced that nothing valuable remained in the warehouse. Most of the important assets had been sold years earlier. When Ethan asked about purchasing the neglected pile in the corner, Richard laughed openly. "That," he said, "it's nothing but junk. Nobody wants it. If you're willing to waste your money, be my guest." Several people nearby chuckled at the comment. Ethan knew exactly how much money remained in his savings account. The total was just over $2,000, money he had spent years collecting little by little. It represented security, rent payments, and protection against emergencies. Spending it all on a single purchase sounded reckless. For several minutes he stood silently, weighing the risks. Common sense told him to walk away. Yet another voice inside him insisted that there was something unusual about the collection. The crates, instruments, and machinery seemed too carefully stored to be completely worthless. After one final look, Ethan made his decision and handed over the money. The laughter began almost immediately. Several buyers shook their heads as Ethan signed the paperwork. One man whispered that he must have lost his mind. Another suggested he would regret the purchase by the end of the week. Richard Coleman appeared especially amused. "You just spent your last $2,000 on scrap metal," he said. "I've seen bad investments before, but this one might be the worst." Ethan forced a smile and thanked him anyway. Deep down, however, he felt nervous. The money was gone, and there was no guarantee he would ever recover it. Transporting the items proved far more difficult than Ethan expected. He rented an old truck and spent the entire afternoon loading machinery, boxes, and crates. Many pieces were heavier than they appeared. By the time he finished, his hands were covered in dirt and small cuts. Exhausted but determined, he drove everything to a rented storage space near his apartment. As night fell, he stood surrounded by the mountain of dusty items he had purchased. For a brief moment, doubt entered his mind. Maybe Richard had been right. Maybe he had wasted everything on worthless junk. The following morning, Ethan began sorting through the collection piece by piece. He cleaned dirt from old instruments, opened damaged boxes, and documented anything that looked unusual. Most items appeared ordinary at first glance. There were rusted tools, outdated machine parts, and stacks of faded paperwork. Hours passed without any exciting discoveries. By evening, frustration started replacing optimism. He wondered whether his instincts had finally failed him. Still, he refused to quit. If years of searching had taught him anything, it was that valuable discoveries rarely appeared immediately. Patience often revealed details that others overlooked. Several days later, while opening one of the sealed wooden crates, Ethan noticed something unexpected. Hidden beneath layers of packing material rested a collection of antique mechanical devices unlike anything he had encountered before. Their craftsmanship was extraordinary. Intricate engravings covered polished brass surfaces, and several pieces bore symbols indicating significant historical origins. Excitement rushed through him. These items clearly did not belong among ordinary industrial equipment. He carefully cleaned each piece and examined every marking. The more he studied them, the more convinced he became that they could be rare collectibles rather than forgotten scrap. Unable to identify the objects himself, Ethan turned to books, online archives, and historical records. Every evening after work, he spent hours researching manufacturers, serial numbers, and antique collector databases. Slowly, a fascinating story began to emerge. Some of the devices appeared connected to a limited production run from nearly a century earlier. Others were associated with important industrial innovations that had transformed manufacturing during their era. Information was scarce, making the items potentially even more valuable. With each discovery, Ethan's confidence grew. What everyone had dismissed as junk was beginning to look remarkably important. As the days passed, Ethan continued uncovering clues hidden throughout the collection. Additional crates contained documents, photographs, and accessories that matched the antique devices. Together, they formed a nearly complete historical collection that seemed impossible to replace. The realization left him speechless. While the world had laughed at his decision, he now possessed something that serious collectors might desperately want. He had no idea how much the collection was worth, but one thing was certain: the story was far from over. What began as a risky gamble on a forgotten pile of junk was slowly transforming into the opportunity Ethan had spent his entire life searching for. After weeks of careful research, Ethan finally decided it was time to contact professionals who specialized in rare historical collectibles. He gathered photographs, serial numbers, documents, and detailed descriptions of every item he had discovered. At first, he expected a few polite responses and perhaps some modest interest. Instead, the reactions were immediate and intense. Several experts replied within hours, asking for additional information and requesting meetings. Their excitement surprised him. The same objects that had sat forgotten in dusty crates for decades were suddenly attracting serious attention. Ethan realized he might be holding something far more valuable than he had imagined. The first appraisal took place at a respected antique evaluation firm. Ethan carried several pieces into the office, carefully wrapped to prevent damage. The lead expert examined them silently for nearly an hour. He used magnifying glasses, reference books, and specialized equipment to verify their authenticity. As the inspection continued, more specialists joined the room. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to astonishment. Finally, the lead appraiser leaned back and smiled. He explained that Ethan had uncovered an exceptionally rare collection connected to a significant period of industrial history. Some pieces were believed to be among the few surviving examples in existence. Word of the discovery spread quickly through professional circles. Collectors who normally competed fiercely against one another began discussing Ethan's collection. Historians shared photographs with museums. Auction houses contacted him almost daily. Messages flooded his phone and email inbox. Many people wanted exclusive rights to sell the collection. Others wanted to purchase pieces directly before they reached public auction. Ethan struggled to keep up with the growing attention. Only a few weeks earlier, nobody had taken him seriously. Now, influential experts and wealthy buyers were treating him like the owner of a historical treasure. One afternoon, Ethan received an invitation to display several items at a private collectors' event. The gathering included investors, museum representatives, and antique enthusiasts from across the country. Nervous but excited, he accepted. As attendees examined the collection, conversations filled the room. People pointed out unique design features and discussed the historical significance of specific pieces. Some collectors openly admitted they had spent years searching for similar artifacts without success. Others believed the collection should be preserved together because of its remarkable completeness. By the end of the evening, Ethan had received multiple offers that exceeded everything he had expected. The first serious buyer offered $200,000 for only a portion of the collection. Ethan nearly accepted immediately. The amount was life-changing compared to anything he had ever earned. However, several advisors encouraged patience. They believed the collection's value could increase significantly if sold through a competitive auction process. Ethan listened carefully and decided not to rush. The choice required discipline because financial pressure still weighed heavily on him. His apartment remained small, his job remained demanding, and his bank account was far from comfortable. Yet something told him to wait a little longer. As news continued spreading, media outlets began covering the story. Headlines described how an ordinary worker had spent his last savings on what everyone believed was worthless junk. Interviews followed. Journalists asked Ethan about the warehouse, the purchase, and the discovery. Viewers were fascinated by the idea that priceless collectibles had remained hidden in plain sight for decades. The story captured public imagination because it represented hope. People enjoyed seeing someone succeed through determination and vision rather than luck alone. Ethan always emphasized that the discovery required effort, research, and persistence after the initial purchase. Meanwhile, Richard Coleman, the CEO who had mocked Ethan, began hearing about the growing excitement surrounding the collection. At first, he dismissed the reports as exaggerations. Surely no forgotten warehouse items could be worth serious money. But as articles appeared and experts confirmed the collection's authenticity, his confidence began to fade. He remembered laughing at Ethan in front of everyone. He remembered calling the purchase worthless. The more information he learned, the more uncomfortable he became. For the first time, he wondered whether he had made a costly mistake by dismissing the items so quickly. Eventually, a prestigious auction house agreed to feature the collection in a major event dedicated to rare historical artifacts. Months of preparation followed. Specialists created detailed catalogues explaining the significance of each piece. Professional photographers captured high-quality images. Marketing campaigns targeted collectors around the world. Anticipation grew with every passing week. Industry experts predicted strong bidding, but nobody could accurately estimate the final result. Some believed the collection might sell for several $100,000. Others predicted much higher figures. Ethan tried not to focus on the numbers. He simply hoped the event would reward his faith and hard work. The day of the auction arrived with enormous excitement. Collectors filled the room, while additional participants joined through online bidding platforms. Ethan sat quietly near the back, his heart racing. As the first item appeared, bidding began immediately. Numbers climbed faster than expected. Every time the auctioneer called a new amount, multiple buyers responded. The competition intensified with each lot. What started as thousands of dollars quickly became tens of thousands. Ethan could barely believe what he was witnessing. Months earlier, these same objects had been hidden beneath dust and forgotten packaging inside a neglected warehouse. As the auction continued, the atmosphere became electric. Wealthy collectors competed aggressively for ownership. Museums entered bidding wars against private investors. International buyers joined remotely, pushing prices even higher. Several items shattered previous expectations. Applause erupted repeatedly as records were broken. Ethan felt overwhelmed by disbelief and gratitude. The collection's value continued climbing beyond anything he had imagined during those long nights of research. Experts exchanged amazed glances, while journalists documented every major sale. It became clear that the event was turning into one of the most talked about auctions of the year. The most significant pieces were saved for last. By then, excitement had reached extraordinary levels. Two prominent collectors became locked in a fierce battle over the centerpiece items. Neither seemed willing to surrender. The auctioneer's voice grew louder as bids increased in massive jumps. Hundreds of thousands became more than 1 million. Spectators watched in stunned silence. Finally, after one final bid, the hammer came down. The room erupted with applause. When the final calculations were completed, the entire collection had generated nearly $2 million. Ethan sat motionless, struggling to process what had just happened. News of the results spread across the country within hours. Newspapers, television programs, and online publications covered the remarkable outcome. The story of a struggling young man transforming a $2,000 purchase into a multi-million-dollar fortune inspired countless people. Many described it as one of the most incredible investment stories in recent memory. Messages of congratulations poured in from strangers. Former classmates, co-workers, and acquaintances reached out after hearing the news. Ethan appreciated the support, but remained humble. He understood that success had come from recognizing potential where others saw only failure. Richard Coleman followed the auction results closely. Watching the final numbers appear on screen felt almost unreal. The collection he had dismissed as junk had produced a fortune. Every headline reminded him of the moment he laughed at Ethan's decision. Friends and business associates asked whether he truly had sold the collection for only $2,000. Embarrassed, he admitted that he had. The experience became a painful lesson. Years of business success had convinced him that he could instantly recognize value. Yet this situation proved otherwise. Sometimes opportunity arrived disguised as something ordinary. For Ethan, the money represented far more than financial security. It represented validation of his instincts, patience, and willingness to think differently. He paid off debts, secured a comfortable home, and invested carefully in future opportunities. Yet he never forgot the warehouse, the dusty crates, or the ridicule he endured after making the purchase. Those memories reminded him that many of the greatest opportunities appear unattractive at first glance. People often judge value based on appearances rather than potential. Ethan's journey proved that hidden treasures still exist for those willing to look deeper. In the years that followed, and the story remained a favorite example among entrepreneurs, investors, and collectors. It demonstrated that success often belongs to those who notice what others overlook. A pile of forgotten machinery and dusty boxes had seemed worthless to nearly everyone who saw it. Yet within that neglected collection lay extraordinary value waiting to be discovered. Ethan's transformation from struggling worker to millionaire became a powerful reminder that vision can be more important than resources. What others mocked as junk became the foundation of a fortune. proving that opportunity frequently hides where nobody expects to find it.